before sunrise on a mild summer morning in June 1995. A 27-year-old television news anchor named Jodi Huisentruit hurriedly left her apartment in Mason City, Iowa, headed for work. But she never arrived, and her disappearance has never been solved. In 2003, two television news reporters created FindJodi.com, a website dedicated to preserving Jodi's memory and keeping her case alive. This is the official Find Jodi podcast. Welcome back to the Find Jodi podcast. I'm Scott Fuller. Mention the Jodi Huisentruit case in Mason City, Iowa, and the name John Vansice is not far behind in the conversation. Vansice was a friend of Jodi's who spent significant time with her in the days and weeks and even hours before she disappeared. Both were new arrivals in Mason City. Jodi had been in town for about 10 months when the pair met, and quickly their social circles overlapped, as they do in a friendly Midwestern town the size of Mason City. Vansice might have been new to Mason City, but he was Iowa, through and through, born and bred. He married when he was 23 and a student at William Penn College in Oskaloosa, Iowa. That marriage eventually ended in divorce, prompting Vansice to make a fresh start, and that's how he ended up in Mason City, living actually for a time at the very same apartment complex where Jodi disappeared, although he'd moved out several months before June of '95. Who is John Vansice? More importantly for us, why do so many in the area locally believe to this day that he was responsible for Jodi's disappearance? And just how compelling is the argument for that theory? Coming up next. Prior to the release of this episode, the Find Jodi team did reach out to Vansice. We tried to make contact with him. We wanted to give him an opportunity to provide a comment or a statement or to be interviewed. As of the release of this episode, though, we have not heard anything in response. Vansice himself hasn't granted interviews to the press about Jodi's case in many years, although he did in 1995. This is John Vansice, interviewed by the television program A Current Affair within just days of Jodi's disappearance.
Monday night, she stopped by for a short time to watch a videotape that I had of her birthday party that I and some friends put on for her. And we just had a good time, and she enjoyed watching the tape. And then she left and went on to go home.
Vansice said he knew Jodi for 7 months, but was not romantically involved with her.
Jodi and I became very good friends, nothing more, nothing less. We did things as a group with other people, and we just got to know each other a lot, and we liked each other. We had a lot of fun together. Like a father-daughter situation.
Vansice talked about Jodi in the past tense, fearing the worst.
Jodi was a beautiful person, do anything for you. Very honest, very outstanding, very intelligent lady. A lot of common sense.
Vansice says he has no idea who would want to harm his friend, but she may have had reason to fear for her life. She told police last October that she was followed while jogging.
She always had a concern about being stalked because she is on TV every day and everybody can see her. She's young, she's a very lovely lady, she's a very outgoing type person, and she had a great personality.
On 2 separate occasions, investigators have interviewed Vansice, but he was unable to give them any leads.
The police were very congenial. I mean, they asked me a lot of questions and tell me exactly everything I knew, which I did.
Only hours ago, John Vansice made a personal plea to have Jodi return safe and unharmed.
Whatever you want, we will give you. We will give you money. We'll give you anything you want. Just let us know. Please, please bring her back.
Some have said that specific appearance solidified suspicion in the minds of the community in Mason City as to Vansice's possible involvement in what happened to Jodi. It's pointed out that John refers to Jodi in the past tense, even though the search for Jodi alive was still very much in full swing. For a few days after she disappeared, there was still widespread hope in the community that Jodi was alive. At the time he gave that interview, the Mason City police hadn't even yet said publicly they thought foul play was involved. Also in that interview, some people pointed to what they believed was a slight discrepancy about whether or not Jodi feared having a stalker. Vansice had previously said no.
She never mentioned anything to me about anybody stalking her.
Yet, in the appearance on A Current Affair,
She always had a concern about being stalked because she is on TV every day and everybody can see her.
just little things, really. But things would indeed change in a big way for Vansice and the community as time wore on. And it wouldn't take long. Things also changed when it came to John Vansice's interaction with police, at least according to John. Though in that week following Jodi's disappearance, Vansice said police were very polite and congenial, that would apparently change as the months passed. Vansice later said the police, quote, worked me over pretty good. He also claims to have been administered a polygraph examination, which he says he passed. 6 weeks into the investigation, Vansice felt he was being crucified. He said as much. I've been crucified by the media. I have friends who won't talk to me. So why would John Vansice have killed his friend? The assumption by many was one of the oldest motives there is. Here is Amy Coons from 1995. Amy was the producer at Jodi's TV station, the last person to speak with her on the phone that morning.
She wasn't dating anyone exclusively. She had an older friend. He was about 50 years old, John Vansice. I knew how much fun they had together, and I knew that he wanted her as more than just a friend. And Jodi had talked before that we've talked it over and we're just friends, and John knows that, and we still hang out and still have fun together.
So there were a few people in Jodi's world who thought that John Vansice might have some feelings toward her, which may have stood out especially given their difference in age. Vansice was over 20 years Jodi's senior. Rumors aside, John Vansice was about to have bigger concerns than being ostracized in the community in the wake of his young friend's disappearance. The Mason City Police Department was already taking a long, hard look at the seed salesman who was recently divorced, with an admitted closeness and fondness to a missing woman he'd only known for 7 months. Here's Mason City Police investigator Frank Stearns, interviewed by ABC News.
We learned that he was the last person to see Jodi alive that night. He told us that everything was fine when she left his apartment.
And there was no evidence of a souring of a relationship, or perhaps one person wanting a little more than the other person might have wanted, anything that might have led to a quarrel?
We didn't find anything that may have led to a quarrel. We found that John had strong feelings for Jodi. And I think that's obvious in the news clips, in the hours and the days right after Jodi's disappearance.
But she just meant so much to me, and we had so much fun together, her and her friends. And I even named my boat after her because just because she's Jodi, and she's been such a big part of my life here lately, and she just makes me feel so good and feel great about things. That's Jodi. I mean, you can't help but love that woman. You just can't help but love her.
What is known about John Vansice's movements and activities before, during, and after the disappearance of Jodi Huisentruit? Actually, before she disappeared on Tuesday morning, Jodi and John's timelines intertwined quite a bit. Jodi spent the weekend in Iowa City, a few hours south of Mason City. She and a few friends, along with Vansice and his son, were enjoying some time there on a lake in John's boat. The boat you just heard John Vansice say he named after Jodi. Although it's worth pointing out that such ski boats aren't officially named, not in the way that a larger vessel would be, but regardless. One of the friends who tagged along was a woman named Tammy Baker.
Jodi and John came and picked me up at my new home, and we drove down to Iowa City, and this was Friday afternoon. We went out in downtown Iowa City carousing, and we stayed at, John had purchased a home for his son who was going to school at the University of Iowa. So his son and 3 roommates lived in a house in Iowa City, so we just stayed there for the weekend. See, Jodi and I slept in the same room. It was fun. It was, there were a fun group of people there, and it was a pretty typical weekend. We just were silly and water skiing and just hanging out and doing all those fun things. I did have to break off from the group a few times because I had to finish up my packing, but other than that, spent most of the time with them on that weekend.
Tammy told me that nothing was amiss between John or Jodi, or anyone else, during that trip, which was supposed to last from Friday through Sunday, but the weather cut their plans short, and so Jodi was home by early Sunday evening. She reported to work as usual on Monday morning, and then at 9 a.m., Jodi left for the Highland Park golf course to play in a fundraising event. This has been a bit confused over the years because that event was rained out, and so Jodi returned home to her apartment to change clothes and then met up with others from the fundraiser at the Mason City Country Club for an indoor social gathering, where she spent the rest of the day. As for what John Vansice later said happened next, we bring in FindJodi team member Caroline Lowe, a veteran investigative crime reporter of 40 years.
Jodi came over to his place that evening to watch a videotape a friend of theirs had taken of a surprise birthday party that he had co-hosted a couple weeks earlier. And he said they watched the video, not clear how long she was there, then she went home. We don't know if there's any witnesses to that, but that's John Vansice's description of what Jodi was doing that evening.
Police have indicated that Jodi was home to make a call from her apartment at 8:24 p.m. It's believed she left the golf tournament sometime between 7:45 and sometime after 8 p.m. That leaves 20 to 30 minutes of time for Jodi to visit with John and watch the tape before arriving home. Investigator Frank Stearns in 2010.
From what we put together the night before, she was at a fundraising golf outing at the country club here in Mesa City. From that, she went to a friend's house and then at home where she called some of her friends that live out of state.
From that account, it seems police believe that Jodi left the golf tournament, watched the tape at John's house, and then was home on the phone by 8:24 p.m. That timeline, in the words of investigators, is a little tight. And to us, too, it doesn't seem altogether plausible. But couldn't Jodi have done those things in a different order? Couldn't she have left the golf tournament, gone home first, and made a call, and then gone to John's to watch the tape? What information do police have that indicates to them that Jodi went straight to John's house from the golf tournament? We don't know. But we do know that Jodi did not own a cell phone. So when did John and Jodi arrange to meet to watch the videotape? Perhaps that Sunday before on the way home? Perhaps that same Monday morning? But how would those plans have been confirmed between the two? Might Jodi have wanted to stop home after the golf tournament to check her messages? Maybe to see if the arranged meeting with John was still on? Or maybe there was no prearrangement. We just don't know those things either. The next place that we know Jodi to be is at home prior to 4 a.m. That's when she's called and apparently woken by Amy Kuntz, her producer at work, telling her that she was late. Jodi was abducted about 20 minutes later. You might be wondering now, what is John Vansice doing during this period of time? What is his alibi? Well, on the one hand, what is anyone's alibi for 4 a.m.? Nobody has publicly come forward to say they were with John, say in bed at 4 a.m., but there is someone who says she talked to him around 6 a.m. LaDonna Woodford recently came forward to tell her story of taking a morning walk with John Vansice very early on that Tuesday morning, just hours after Jodi was abducted. This is what LaDonna told me in 2018.
I was at my home, and I called him between 6 and 6:30, and he picked up the phone, but he was like, hello? And I was like, John, did I wake you up? And he goes, yeah, what time is it, you know? And because I knew John so well and we were such close friends, I could tell he was sleeping. And I said, John, hey, it's LaDonna. I just want to know if you're up for working out. And he's like, oh, I don't know. I'm really tired, but I should do this. And I was like, okay, well, you don't have to do this. But I said, if you want to do it, I said, I will come in and we'll work, we'll work out for an hour or so. And he said, well, because I haven't gotten up and I haven't had my coffee, he said, why don't you just meet me by my house? And I was like, okay, great. So I pulled up and he came out, obviously, and we started walking, and we just picked an area that was around his house. And then all of a sudden we had went like less than a block, and there was a payphone. And I said, you know what? I had talked to my boss at the newspaper, Carol, and she wanted to come and work out with us. So you know what? I should probably stop and call her to let her know that we're not where we normally are. And so I there's a payphone there right on the curb, and I called her and I said, "Hey, Carol, it's LaDonna. We're over here on da-da-da-da-da. So if you are going to show up, we're not where we regularly are." We just continue to walk.
According to LaDonna Woodford's timeline, John Vansice was at his house to receive her phone call around 6 a.m. that morning, about 90 minutes after Jodi was abducted. Worth noting is that LaDonna Woodford was subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury, and so she has told her story many times, including under oath. Also, LaDonna's timeline is presumably verifiable through phone records, not just hers and John's, but also that payphone she says they made a call to a friend from. Then the two walked for about 30 to 60 minutes. Then they parted ways and went about their respective Tuesday. And then at some point on Tuesday morning, John Vansice became aware of what had happened to Jodi, and he showed up at the apartment complex, where police were processing the scene. FindJodi has not independently confirmed how John Vansice became aware or when he became aware of Jodi's abduction, so we're not going to speculate here. But we do know that John Vansice arrived at the scene and told police he was the last person to see Jodi the night before at his own house. FindJodi team member Jay Alberio, with 27 years of experience in law enforcement and criminal investigations in Minnesota.
And you're always going to look at the people closest to the victim. And then with John showing up at the scene, inserting himself, that's gonna raise some eyebrows and like, oh, you need to look at this guy further. They're going along with over 25 years and haven't been able to absolutely confirm that he has an alibi that would say he couldn't have done it. I think they're still focused on him. From the start, I think John has been one of the main persons of interest.
It is true that John Vansice is not alibied for Jodi's abduction. And again, many people wouldn't be for a crime like that occurred at 4 a.m. But if LaDonna Woodford's timeline is accurate, Vansice would have had 90 minutes to commit the crime and return back to his house, which is certainly not impossible. But where would Jodi's body have been during the time that John and LaDonna were on the walk? Where would it have been a few hours later when John arrived at the scene? Jodi's body, which has never been found, would need to be concealed or disposed of amidst all of the above. Even so, Mason City police don't believe a stranger likely abducted Jodi. Lieutenant Frank Stearns was asked in 2010 on an HLN show, "Do you believe an obsessive fan did this, or was it someone that Jodi knew personally?"
Well, obviously, we're not going to get tunnel vision. We're going to keep an open mind to anything. Would an obsessive fan, would they wait around an extra hour hiding behind a garbage dumpster and possibly being seen? I don't feel they would. It was merely 12 steps from her apartment door to her car door. I mean, we're talking seconds, and she would have been in the safety of her own car. So it wasn't a stranger that just drove by and seen her walking through the parking lot. But I can't rule that out either. We've got nothing showing that there was a stalker, no gifts, no cards, no phone calls, other than one instance that she reported a truck was following her that we checked up and followed up on. Nothing else other than that.
As an aside, FindJodi has reported recently about that previous stalking incident. You can read the post at FindJodi.com. And that comment you just heard Lieutenant Stearns make about the phone calls, we'll need to revisit that at a later time too. But that's for a different episode. What we know today is that for people that knew each other a few months, 7 months, John and Jodi had something of a close relationship. How close and to what intentions is probably impossible to know perfectly accurately now. But John Vansice does appear in Jodi's own personal journal. In a previous episode of this podcast, we covered the release of Jodi's journal to the media in 2008. It turned out to be the wife of a former Mason City police chief who had anonymously mailed a copy of Jodi's journal to the local newspaper. The paper chose to publish a handful of entries from the journal, and so we know some of what Jodi had written in the days and weeks before she disappeared. FindJodi's Caroline Lowe.
Clearly, the journals tell us she was spending a lot of time with him in June. Her last few weeks in Mason City, she was with him. but mostly sounded like group activities. There were things like the water skiing trip the weekend before she disappeared, some other water skiing events, her birthday party that he co-hosted. So she mentions him a lot, but it's largely in the context of group things. And no hint in the journal of any issues with him, but as we've talked about amongst ourselves and our team, sometimes people put a certain glow on things or whatever. So it's hard to read into it if she had any concerns about him, but we don't see anything in what was published. Again, what was published was a tiny portion of that 84-page journal. But we do know from those last few weeks that she writes about him frequently and doing things with him.
Shortly after Jodi disappeared, John Vansice moved to Arizona, where he lives today. He's spoken about the incident for public consumption only once since then, around the same time when many who follow the case were surprised by a new development. In March 2017, a search warrant was executed against Vansice, seeking GPS data for 2 vehicles.
Whatever they were going for, they did not find, according to what the chief told 48 Hours. We also know that the 2 vehicles involved were not manufactured back in 1995 when Jodi was abducted. So we know they weren't involved in her abduction back then. So we can kind of check that box off. The majority of the speculation from talking with people in law enforcement and others is that police must have gotten some indication or some thought that maybe John Vansice was coming to Iowa for something and maybe would be going to a crime scene. So therefore, they identified 2 vehicles connected to him and had GPS put on there. But obviously, from what the chief told 48 Hours and what we've seen, it did not produce anything. It certainly didn't produce anything that's led to any resolution or charges in this case.
In that same month, back in March of 2017, FindJodi has confirmed that John Vansice was compelled to appear back in Iowa. He was subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury by the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Iowa. After all that time, the authorities had renewed their interest in John Vansice. But why? Why then? The 2017 search warrant was sealed by a judge, and it remains sealed today.
The resealing of it every year, the process is basically the same, I assume, that the prosecutor, the county attorney, has to go before a judge and say, the evidence attached to this search warrant is this, and it still needs to be protected for these reasons. It may be procedural, it may be less procedural, I guess, depending on the judge, but it's resealed every year. In your experience covering cases where search warrants are involved that are sealed, is it common? Is this something that usually happens, the resealing year after year of a search warrant?
What's different in this case, in fact, I just talked earlier today with an Iowa investigator who said he's never seen it done year after year. He thinks that might be more of a procedure in Cerro Gordo County, where Jodi disappeared from. But he said typically he would get a search warrant sealed and it stayed sealed. So sometimes it gets down to the protocol of that court, of that judge. But no, it's not unusual. It's not uncommon to keep an active investigation, particularly something of this nature, keep it sealed. Okay. In Jacob Wetterling's case, we didn't see any of the search warrants till long after his case had gone to court, long after Jacob had been found and the person who killed him was off in prison. So I don't anticipate we would see Jodi's anytime soon.
Whatever evidence police presented to the judge to gain access to Vansice's vehicles will remain a secret to protect the integrity of the police case, for now at least. John Vansice will be 75 in February.
Are the police going to spend any time or resources pursuing something if a suspect is dead, or if a county attorney or a DA says, we don't believe we can prosecute the suspect? If the person the police think did it, if he's not prosecutable for whatever reason, what happens for the police?
That's a good question. Your goal still would be try to clear the case, clear it by identifying the person that was responsible. Whether they're going to be able to bring charges against the person or not, that's probably not going to happen if the person is incapable of defending himself. And then obviously if the person is deceased, there will be no charges. It just would be that you cleared the case. You can exceptionally clear the case. Cases are filed by certain things. There's pending, there's exceptionally clear, declared by arrest. When you close the case, you check the box on one of those. And usually if it's exceptionally cleared, it means you have enough evidence to develop the case, but for some reason, the person's dead or incapable of defending themselves, you're not going to bring a charge.
The Mason City Police Department has always, from the beginning, been interested in John Vansice and Jodi's case. Once again, Lieutenant Frank Stearns, who worked the case for its entirety until his recent retirement in 2019.
Whoever took Jodi knew her schedule, knew where she lived, knew what time she went to work, and was patient enough to wait even after she overslept. Knew her car, and even knew what door she'd come out.
John Vansice is by far the most named person of interest in the media and in the public. Some who we've talked to, who knew both Jodi and John, say rightly so. But others, who are just as close to both of them, can't imagine John being involved. Tammy Baker, the friend who spent some time with both John and Jodi over a period of a couple of days and only 2 days before the abduction, is one of those people. She told me that to John, Jodi was worth more alive than dead.
Exactly. He wasn't a stupid guy, but he wasn't a manipulative person. He really did wear his heart on his sleeve, and I always felt bad for him that I felt he was slammed with this without being responsible. I mean, think how horrible that would be.
LaDonna Woodford, who says she spent nearly an hour with John Vansice that same morning. In fact, only 2.5 hours after he was supposed to have abducted Jodi.
There's just such a slim chance that John would have went over there. And why would he go over there? Because he had full access to Jodi. He just spent the whole weekend with her. Why would you do it then and at that time and in front of her apartment complex? Because he lived there. He used to live there.
As for John Vansice now, he's gone back to not talking. Although many have tried over the years, including us. Caroline Lowe went to Arizona for just that reason some years ago.
We have tried over the years many times to reach Vansice directly. In fact, before I joined FindJodi, I worked at WCCO TV, and I went down about 23 years ago, and a photographer and I tracked Vansice down at a restaurant outside Phoenix, and I thought maybe he would talk to me because I had explored another alternate person of interest. But he rolled down his window and he said to me, "No, you guys have done, meaning the media, have done nothing but ruin me," and he drove off. And that's after he had talked to the media in the early days, and I've had plenty of people who've done that. And some people think the fact that he won't do on-camera interviews is a sign of guilt. Again, I've interviewed people. I've had innocent people hang up the phone on me when I've called them after someone else has been charged because they want nothing to do with the media. So I think it's really wrong to give too much weight to John Vansice slamming the door on anybody. If he had nothing to do with what happened to Jodi, I don't think that should be considered as any sign of anything other than he's done with dealing with the media.
Right. So these reporters who have tracked him down over the years and sort of ambushed him at his front door, and he refuses to talk, and people sitting at home might say, well, it's suspicious, of course. What's he hiding? Why doesn't he talk? I don't think almost anyone alive can put themselves in a situation like what John Vansice has been through, guilty or innocent.
Exactly. I can recall calling the husband of a woman who was murdered for years. The media and police had kind of pointed in the direction at the husband. They were going through divorce, and it turned out to be a serial killer. It turned out to be Paul Stefani, who we talked about before, who'd murdered this woman. And I had to call the husband, and he hung up on me, and I called other people. I've had doors closed in my face. I don't know that I wouldn't do the same thing if I'd had that hanging over me all those years.
All of the theories aside, all the suspicions, all the rumors aside, there is no evidence that John Vansice was responsible for what happened to Jodi. There is only speculation. Through its actions over the years, the warrants, the subpoena, we do know the Mason City Police Department have been interested in John Vansice from the very beginning and down through the years since. Vansice has repeatedly denied any involvement. That's what he said in 1995. That's what he said most recently in 2019 in a statement made on his behalf. John Vansice has never been charged in Jodi's case or any other similar violent crime, which, by the way, cannot be said of some of the other people of interest in Jodi's case that have come up over the years and that we'll examine further in future episodes of the podcast.
I guess at this point, what I'm looking for with John Vansice is any evidence they had a romantic relationship or a desired romantic relationship from John's side, any evidence that John Vansice were involved in any part of the disappearance, there's no proof.
Absolutely none. And I keep trying to figure out what would the scenario be if there was some kind of unrequited attention or whatever. What would have happened that Monday night? Because if he had that interest in her, it certainly was before Monday night, what would have happened that would have put him in that parking lot, high-risk situation, versus if maybe he made an effort to be closer and she rebuffed it. Well, tomorrow's another day. What would have taken it to the level of kidnapping her, taking her away? I just don't see that. I don't know what police have that maybe points that way, but I certainly haven't heard that from anybody that can point to what it would be. It's all speculation and no evidence.
People who follow the case are free, obviously, to form whatever opinion they like. Police, you would hope, would remain objective and pursue leads as they come up. Whether you're someone just following the case, or especially if you're an investigator with the police, if you get one suspect in mind, that's fine, but if you're wrong, you're going to blow the whole case.
Well, and that's the same true as reporters. You can get tunnel vision and you get locked into something and you look for sometimes things that confirm it. I was asked a couple of years ago, in fact, I wrote a post for FindJodi, when 48 Hours focused mostly on Vansice, and they also took a look at serial rapist Tony Jackson, asked which one did I think? And I said, my answer is none of the above. I feel like we need to keep an open lane to somebody else because I've seen too many cases in my 40 years doing this which did not turn out to be the way you think it would. And I'd hate to think that somebody wouldn't come forward with information because they think, okay, it doesn't point toward Vansice, maybe the police don't want to hear it. And I would say if you're sitting on something, if you have some other information, even if it doesn't relate to Vansice, please come forward and share it. Don't hold back just because you think it's a done deal, but police don't have enough evidence to take the case to trial.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the FindJodi podcast. If you have any information about the 1995 disappearance of Jodi Huisentruit, we encourage you to contact the Mason City, Iowa Police Department. You can also reach out to FindJodi.com anonymously or call our tip line at 970-458-JODI. FindJodi is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We exist to continue to educate the public about Jodi's case, as well as other missing persons. The team are a group of volunteers, and any donations to FindJodi.com, to include the ad revenues generated by this podcast, are used in those efforts. For the entire FindJodi team, I'm Scott Fuller. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening.